Hi. Today I will be reading some of my original fan fiction and regular fiction works that I've worked on throughout the years of my life. I've been writing for a very long time. And the first book I'm going to read from is called The Land of Ananthara, The Fall of Ozan, Champion of the Sun, which is very much inspired by the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I hope you enjoy. Prologue. The smell of sweat and earth laid heavy on the air. Adrenaline was a force so strong that it was almost tangible. On the peaks of the highest mountain in Ananthara, two fierce opponents enraged in a raging battle. Crystalline, Maiden of the Stars, looked on in horror as Ozan, Champion of the Sun, and Kazul, Minion of the Moon, fought to spill each other's blood. "Stop! This is madness! Have you both forgotten the sacred pact between the two of you? A pact as ancient as the sun and the moon themselves," she yelled to them desperately. Heedless, Ozan and Kazul fought on. Crystalline clutched a frozen hand to her throat as Kazul made a strike at Ozan's neck. With a swift and fluent move, Ozan deflected himself away from the blow. "This cannot be! Ozan, Kazul, you mustn't kill one another! The balance must be preserved!" Crystalline darted frantically around the pair, vying for each other's attention. If she could just make them stop. "Crystalline, move out of the way. You shouldn't be here," Ozan said, jerking his head in Crystalline's direction. "Oh, is the Star Maiden a distraction for you, Ozan?" Kazul leered, baring his teeth. "I may have you dead yet," he declared viciously. Truly, he would love nothing more than to kill Ozan and then claim the lovely Star Maiden all for himself. "The only one who will die today is you, Kazul. Your evil ways will come to an end this day," returned Ozan, lunging forward. The sound of steel on steel resounded around the peak. Crystalline was becoming desperate. There was one way to get Ozan's attention. It wasn't the scenario she had in mind, but it was her only chance. "Ozan, I'm pregnant!" Her last words echoed around them, suffocating them with the weight of her testament. Ozan and Kazul turned to face her, shock, disbelief, and incredulity passing over each of their faces in curious succession. "How? When? And why tell me now?" Ozan shouted, disbelief clear in his sun-yellow eyes. Kazul looked from Ozan to Crystalline, the feeling of rage and indignation building in him in a swift torrent. Ozan had touched her, his Crystalline. Ozan took what was his by right. Enraged and furious, Kazul threw himself towards Ozan. Crystalline only had a moment to realize making that revelation was a mistake before Kazul made contact with Ozan, tackling him and causing both of their swords to fly out of their hands. Ozan and Kazul fell in a tangle of fists and heels, each trying to lock on the next one's throat. Snow crushed beneath them as they rolled around on the ground, the white fluff getting into their eyes and sticking onto their clothing. Crystalline shrieked in fear. Ozan ended up above his foe, choking Kazul with powerful fingers. "Today you die, minion," grated Ozan through bare teeth, struggling to stay conscious. Kazul reached for the rock inches from his outstretched hand. He seized it and smashed it alongside Ozan's ear, freeing himself. With a quick jump, Kazul seized his sword once more and turned to face Ozan. The attack had caught him unaware. He hadn't anticipated such an attack, mainly because it was so desperate on his part. And desperate, Kazul usually was not. Still disoriented, Ozan stumbled to his feet. Kazul took advantage of the opening and with a savage yell rushed his blade at Ozan's unprotected chest. "Kazul, no!" screamed Crystalline. Tears stung her silver-colored eyes as Kazul's blade hit home and pierced Ozan's heart. For the space of 3 heartbeats, everything was still. Nothing, not a soul stirred. Even the air that had blown so fiercely only a moment before fell still. The entire universe held its breath as Ozan, Sun Champion of Ananthara, was slain. Shock brought Crystalline to her knees. A brilliant burst of pure sunlight erupted from Ozan, illuminating the sky. The brilliant ray struck Crystalline's weeping form and engulfed her body in warm layers of sunlight. The child in her belly stirred, pulsating with life, as brilliant as the light ebbed from around her. She could feel her baby kicking deep within. She tried in vain to stand to her feet, to run to Ozan. Grief held her in her position, and so she knelt there, helpless and lost. The last remnants of light finally faded, and Kazul stood over Ozan's lifeless form, now encased in frost. "I have won, Sun Champion," he breathed, victory awash all over his being, pumping sweet adrenaline through his veins. How he had longed for this day. It was too many times to count. Here, standing over the body of his fallen enemy, Kazul felt unstoppable. There was nothing he could not do. His body shook with the intensity of his victory. The age of the sun is over. The rule of darkness has come. Crystalline bowed her head as she wept bitter tears for herself, her child, and the future of Ananthara. The people of Ananthara stand on the hills gathered about, calling to one another in dismay. Come out, see here, come see, they shout. The sun has fled, gone is the day. Nothing but darkness left in its wake. The pact has been broken, the sun champion slain. Darkness is upon us in full reign. The sun has been swallowed by the moon. Ananthara left to the mercy of Kazul, but in the crowd a small few do not despair, for a hero will arise and balance the scales. Born of star and sunlight combined, Ananthara will be saved by the child of Crystalline. Prophecy of the Sun, the first 13 verses. I grew up in a few places. I was born in New Jersey and I stayed there for the first couple of years of my life, and then by the time I got to my adolescent years, I moved overseas and I spent the majority of my time, my teen years and my early 20s overseas outside of the country. And currently I'm living in Kingston in Pennsylvania. I don't really use my life experiences to write what I write. I really use my imagination. And I typically like to depart from my reality when I'm writing and write something that's completely unrelated to my experiences. This next book I'm about to read, I wrote a couple of years ago. It was during a dark time, but it was a pretty good outlet, and I named it The Shooting Stars That Fall. The shooting stars signifying that, you know, even in a dark period, there can be hope. And I will read from chapter 8. Here we go. Down on the second floor, Frizz felt out of breath, as if he'd run a marathon. That entire thing did not go the way he thought it would go. Unexplainably, he found a way to screw it up and make it worse for himself. He really was a fool. He berated himself as he let himself into his apartment. Juno was there, pacing anxiously like an expectant father whose wife was in labor. He jumped right on him as soon as he came through the door. What happened? Did you speak to her father? Will I be able to go with you? Calm down, Romeo. It's under control. That was entirely false. But Juno didn't know that. Frizz would figure it out somehow. He had to, because the ticking time bomb just got bigger. My name is Juno, not Romeo, he told Frizz, his tone holding no snark at all. Frizz gave him a side-eyed look. Juno was alien, not from Earth. As sarcastic as his thoughts were, they rang true somehow, which reminded Frizz that he had to get to the bottom of what went down in front of the park. Juno had stopped pacing and was looking pensive, as if he were thinking really hard about something. Frizz studied him, weighed and considered the person he let into his life. He had questions that he intended to get real answers for. What are you hiding? Juno stared, blinking in surprise. His tone was cautious. What do you mean? He inquired in a neutrally careful tone. I mean that you were dead after that sleigh hit you, and then you popped up like nothing happened. No regular person could have done that. You're hiding something, and I want to know what it is. Perhaps I was not dead, just merely unconscious. You were dead. You didn't move or breathe for 10 whole minutes. How are you still alive? What are you not telling me? Juno flinched from the demanding tone his human host leveled at him. He was asking him questions he could not answer. It would put him at too great a risk to reveal his true identity. He'd been careless. He felt angry with himself for making such an amateur slip. I'm not hiding anything from you, he lied instead, turning away from Frizz's accusatory gaze and walking to the bedroom they shared. Frizz struggled to leash his temper. Juno was being dodgy. Like hell, he wasn't going to let him get away with it. He knew something was up. He wasn't stupid. Foolish maybe, but not stupid. Juno spoke like an Isolarian, even looked like one with his pale skin. But there was something off about him that Frizz just couldn't ignore. Don't walk away from me, Juno. I've turned my life upside down to help you. The least you can do to repay me is tell me the truth. Juno stopped in the doorway. The human was right. He had gone out of his way to help him, a complete stranger. He knew it was unreasonable to expect that he could reside in his host's home free of any cost. Frizz was collecting, and Juno had no choice but to pay up. Juno turned to face Frizz, skin glowing and eyes burning pure white light as he spoke in an unearthly baritone. I am Juno's shooting star, Grand Master of the first division of wishing stars, belonging to the cluster humans know as the Big Dipper. I'm here on a mission to grant a wish, and I come to Earth like many stars before me have done, to oversee extraordinary wishes come true. Stars exploded behind Frizz's eyes as Juno's gaze connected with his own, a picture of them falling onto a barren Earth in showers of thousands upon thousands of brightly burning lights, landing onto land and others in sea. More fell onto trees and bushes, structures and roads, all spanning billions of years of civilization since the start of time. Each fallen star possessed transparent eyes of white and pearly skin so like Juno's they appeared to be clones of one another. They raced down to Earth at a speed seen only by few humans in their lifetime, and they looked at Frizz as if seeing into his heart, the very recesses of his soul. He couldn't take it. His brain short-circuited and turned itself off. Then the lights fell away, leaving the back of his own eyelids as the only thing Frizz could see as his consciousness fled on a desperate wind, his body hitting the floor headfirst. When I was 3 years old, I would get my little papers, the construction papers, and my little color pencils, and I would scribble on the papers, and then I would pretend that they were stories, and I would tell them to my parents. And then when I was a little older, I started writing short form things, writing about characters, nothing really concrete. And when I was in school, that's when I really started writing more formal things. The very first story I wrote, I was 8 years old, and I wrote it for a class assignment it was called a pourquoi story, French for a story that explains why something or how something came to be. And the teacher didn't really provide a whole lot of outline for that, so I let my imagination run wild. And I actually picked the subject of imagination as the thing I was going to demonstrate on how that came to be. And it involved a laser gun and stealing people's imaginations, and a hero fighting off the evil villain, stealing everybody's imaginations, and the whole thing was really wild. But as far as what I work on the day-to-day, it's really just stuff for the Cube. The newscast, our show Outside the Box, things like that. I put a lot of time into that type of writing these days. My writing style, I don't really know that I have one. I think I'm pretty much a chameleon when it comes to that, so I can write pretty much any style. But I do think sometimes I tend, especially with my fictional stories, I tend to the more dramatic, poetic type of thing. Drama definitely is my favorite type of genre.
What's your favorite thing you ever wrote?
My BTS fan fiction, for sure. Mr. Justin Bieber made his way down the street in swift progression, his boots making deep vibrations in his legs as he struck the pavement with long, heavy strides. He was dressed in a plain white t-shirt and dark blue jeans. His Rolex and fossil watches lined his wrists while an expensive chain swayed from his neck at the center of his chest. His shades hung low on his face, blocking his face from easy scrutiny. No matter where he went, Justin dressed to impress. His physical appearance mattered a great deal to him. His mind, however, was currently focused on something else besides his apparel. His mind was a tangle of thoughts, and he instructed himself to not think too hard about what he was doing. Life was about survival, and that's all he was trying to do, trying to survive. His steps slowed down as he neared his destination. The closer he got to where he was going, the louder his conscience screamed at him to stop what he was doing and to stop it right now. He silenced the voice. He'd come too far to walk away now. "Did you bring what I asked for?" a feminine voice called to him from the back of the alley. Justin's steps faltered at the sound of this disembodied voice. The setup of the whole thing had his stomach twisting in knots. His instincts shouted at him to abandon this fool mission and get out of there while he still could. "Don't tell me you came all the way out here just to waste my time," the girl warned, stepping from the shadows and into the small ray of sun that filtered into the alley. Oh, she's just a kid, he thought, relaxing just a fraction upon seeing that who he was dealing with was just a young girl. No, I have it, he said, producing a folder of carefully arranged documents. Everything is there, names, phone numbers, addresses, places of frequent visitation, upcoming schedules, everything. He handed the documents to the girl with only a slight hesitation. The girl didn't seem to notice as she took them from him and looked at the papers with glinting, satisfied eyes. The way she looked at the documents made Justin second-guess his decision to give them to her. There was just something kind of evil about the look in her eyes as she read the information. I've kept to my end of the deal. Can I be sure I can count on you to keep yours? The girl rolled her eyes, which were a curious gray color, and fixed him with a patronizing look. Yes, believe me when I say you'll never have to worry about that tutor and her kids ever again, she replied with a touch of venom that Justin picked up on, and it made him slightly confused. There was something about that just didn't sit well with him, and Miss Amina's children weren't the problem, just herself. He felt that there was a deeper meaning behind her words, but he couldn't put his finger on it. His earlier apprehensions returned as he suddenly wanted to be far, far away from here. He said a farewell to the eerie girl and turned to exit the alley, only to discover the way was blocked by 4 other young girls. Not so fast, Justin. You haven't given me everything I wanted yet. Justin looked at the girl, perplexed. What do you mean? I gave you the documents you wanted, he blustered in frightened bewilderment. He held to his end of the bargain. Well, yes, but I want something else besides the documents only, the girl said as she eyed his gold Rolex meaningfully. Understanding dawned in his eyes. The girls at the mouth of the alley closed in on him, each girl brandishing their weapon as they advanced. Outside the alley, passerbyers ducked their heads and walked on faster as screams for help emitted from the dark alley. No one cared to see what was happening. They already knew. There was no help for anyone stupid enough to walk into Sandra's alley. I really wrote it at a time where I was kind of in a crossroad with like my self-identity and what I wanted out of my life, and I discovered BTS in the midst of that, and I don't know if it was the music or what it was exactly, but I came to some epiphanies and I decided that I was going to be who I wanted to be, exactly how I wanted to be it. And my first mode of expression is writing, so the first thing I thought to do was write a book that I felt was true to me, and to just do that regardless of what other people might have thought about it, if I should write it, if I shouldn't write it. I just went for it and I put my entire heart into it, and it turned out to be great, very relatable in some ways to people who are in the same boat of trying to discover themselves. And I really, really would like to write more things like that. Maybe not exactly fan fictions, but more inspired work like that.